Zwei Gläser.
Two. One.
That's no moon.
What's up, everybody? We are live. Sorry about that. This is the Hardcore Casual Podcast, episode 18. He is Jay of F1 Podcast fame. I am Mason of Radio Infamy, and we are the conversation at the table behind you. Only one of the myriad of things that has gone wrong this week so far, Jay.
Yes, absolutely.
So I will get this out of the way up front. We got a couple of things to get out of the way up front. Thing number one, hold on, is that. Thing number one is I'm sick, guys. We have had the death pool for what feels like months, right? Months and months of, like, is this guy going to die because of this cough that would not go away? And now it has turned into a full-blown upper respiratory infection. So, yeah. So there you go. I am under the weather, but I am still here. I was not going to miss it for anything. And while now Jay has contracted my illness randomly, spontaneously.
No, you made me spontaneous combustion laugh right there, and it led to a cough.
It's a contagion. It is a contagion. Hopefully it doesn't spread to any of our listeners.
Yeah.
But we do have a retraction, an admonishment to get out of the way, but it's actually good news. This is a positive thing. There was a bit of misinformation spread yesterday. Well, not yesterday, last week. And actually on a couple of things. We'll get a couple of those out of the way. But first of all, was Jay had mentioned some of the pre-order bonuses for 007 and had mentioned the gold skin for the gun and I don't know if you actually mentioned the outfit, but there's an outfit that you get for pre-ordering. It turns out it's not for pre-ordering. It's for going to the website, IO Interactive's website, and signing up for, making an account on their website and signing up for updates for the game. And then you can get the gold-plated Walther and this particular outfit. So it's a positive. It's way easier. Cheaper. Excuse me. And the other one actually is, we mentioned on last episode, I had to edit it out of our video of it because it ended up not to be. We thought there was going to be a gameplay reveal over the weekend at IO Interactive's big party, and it did not happen. There were several outlets that did report that, which is why we believe that was not the case. So I believe I saw that same 007 First Light trailer at 3 separate shows over this weekend of showcases and things like that. But still excited about it. But I was definitely disappointed that we did not get to look at gameplay or see how they're going to go about that. But we do have some comments and things like that from some of the developers and higher ups from IO Interactive that we can look at and talk about some of the details that we did get after their big showcase on, I believe it was Friday night.
Well, I also have somewhat of an apology. So to be clear, and I have been clear on every episode of this show from 1 to 18, I don't care. I absolutely do not care what system you game on. I don't judge. I want people to enjoy what they do, because one after work hobby is just as arbitrary as any other hobby. So I don't care what you're doing on, and I just want you to be happy. And I'm all about good news anyway. I think we get just drug in the muck with bad news. And so for a few episodes, we've been talking about the ongoing console war, and we've been talking about possibility of game prices. And now here it is, me, that is going to be broaching the $80 game topic to open tonight's episode when discussing a game that I actually enjoyed playing the first iteration of it, and now we've got a sequel coming out. And my biggest apology is obviously to Mason here, because he was the one that said it's going to come down to third-party developers, whoever breaks the seal on the $80 game. And Obsidian apparently is going to be the first developer to do it with Outer Worlds 2, which will launch at $80. I'm not too happy about this, and yet at the same time, I don't care because, wait for it, drum roll, I'm a Game Pass subscriber, which brings up a whole new can of worms, bag of cats, whatever grouping of animals you want to use to describe it. So I'm going to get to play it, not technically for free because it's a subscription service, but sort of free. But I'm not happy for everybody else.
Well, there is one caveat to that, and that is that this is not a third-party game. This is actually a first-party Xbox Studios game. They bought Obsidian, so this is this. I mean, it. So while it is Xbox first party, it will reverberate through the other ones since they're now putting their stuff everywhere. You know, you can buy Xbox first party games on PlayStation. In fact, we saw Gears of War at a PlayStation showcase, which was wild to see.
Yes.
And if you go to Sony's YouTube page right now, you'll see several first party Xbox games with their trailers on the PlayStation YouTube page. It's kind of weird. So while not third party, this will be the first one that will reverberate across multiple systems for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of weird when it comes to third party with Microsoft, and the reason why is I still have some friends that work there. I got to do some work there. And Microsoft's weird about how they do things, and they're kind of hands off, which I guess if you're a developer under Microsoft, you'd be happy about that. You'd kind of want that hands off. But I feel like, and this might not be true, this is just an opinion from a layperson, that Microsoft is like, we need one of our in-house developers to float the test balloon on the $80 game. And
well, I mean, they already
chose
announced that their
Yeah.
first party games would go to $80. So this is only going to be the first of many
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
going to be $80 from them. I believe the way that they worded it was they would have select first party games that would be $80, but I think all that means is that, you know, they do have some smaller developers that will produce indie-esque titles.
Yeah.
I think those will not be $80, but I think any other like AAA release, I think they're all going to be $80.
And the weird thing is, this actually spawns another whole conversation we could have, and maybe not tonight, but at some point. But is Microsoft saying, "Hey, this game, we're going $80 because we can drive Game Pass subscriptions.
Well, that was what
We can
the
drive
speculation.
non-ownership."
That was what the speculation had been. That was what they were kind of letting the Switch 2 and not Donkey Kong, Mario Kart. That's what they were kind of using to let Mario Kart off the hook was, well, you can bundle it with the Switch 2 and then it's only $50, and they're really just charging $80 to drive everyone to the console pack, like the bundle. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the line that people were using to cope with the $80 price tag for that one. And then for Xbox, it was the same kind of thing where they were saying, well, it's to really funnel people to Game Pass and that kind of thing. But that, while it may be true, you can't play Game Pass on PlayStation right now. So whenever this goes to PlayStation, it's going to be $80. They don't have
$80, yeah.
the option to drive to Game Pass right now. You know, that's so it's while it may drive some people to Game Pass, and don't get me wrong, like Jay said, and I've said many times, is that Game Pass is a great service. It's fantastic. And even if you hardly ever use it, but then that one game comes out and you're like, oh, wait, I have Game Pass, and you can go there and download it. It immediately pays for it, especially if it's $80. That's 8 months of Game Pass or ish. So yeah, it's starting though. It feels like the snowball is rolling down the hill now.
So I got a buddy at work who's an avid Xbox hater, and we'll be laughing about this tomorrow when we discuss it. But you know, he upset about all these games coming to Xbox and how that's what's really driving Microsoft's supposed failure. And you know, I made the comment that once you have it, though, it's a blessing. It really is. And you made the comment earlier that it's one of those things that, no, you don't play every game that's on there, but when you want to, it seems to be there. You know, and I think that is a cool system. And I think you get to say yes more often with Game Pass than you do with PlayStation. and I'm a huge PlayStation fan. That's like it's my go-to. But Xbox does have a lot of good games on Game Pass.
Also makes it easier whenever there's a game that comes out and is disappointing. When it comes out and you're like, oh, that wasn't that great. Well, you didn't spend $80 on it. At
That's
least it was
absolutely
like,
right.
it went along with your thing. So you're like, you know what? I tried it, wasn't for me, but no skin off my back. I'll go back to whatever else they got.
Yeah, and for all of our talk last week about demos and how it just doesn't seem a thing anymore. Although this
Very
week it
rare.
seemed crazy with the Future Game Show or Future Game Showcase and the Summer Game Fest that all these games had immediate demos available. Game Pass is a way to get the full game as a demo if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, that is one thing that we definitely need to bring up here is that we mentioned it last week, but last week was only the beginning because it was everything after that. Basically, Friday, and then throughout the entire weekend. Last week it was Key 3. It was all these things. It was Summer Key 3, right? So
Yeah.
Jeff Keighley and his Summer Games Fest, and then everything kind of piggybacking off that. So we had the State of Play, Summer Games Fest, Future Games Showcase. We had the IOI Showcase. We had the Xbox Showcase.
Yeah.
It was, and we had a special segmented off on its own. The Death Stranding 2 did a live 90-minute presentation with gameplay and interviews from the makers, the actors, all that stuff at the Orpheum Theater. So it was a packed weekend whenever it came to news and trailers, some of which we'll talk about, like Outer Worlds, for example, being one of them, Outer Worlds 2. It was a big, busy weekend.
Yeah, it absolutely was. But a good one. And, I left the weekend with a couple of demos I didn't know I was going to. One was a kind of an arcade take on Formula One called Formula Legends. I played the demo. I loved it. The other one was Jump Ship, which I streamed. I don't know if you got to catch any of that.
I did. I was on there. I'm sad that you did not see me.
Oh, I did not see you on there. But that game looks like it's going to be great. It's actually 4-person co-op crewing a ship, so not everybody's flying.
So it's space Sea of Thieves.
Okay, I haven't. Okay, don't murder me. I have not played Sea of Thieves.
Oh, that's not a murder worthy offense for sure. I'm not going to call you out for that but it's just a thing where it's just multiplayer chaos. It's not anything big or serious. It's all just in fun. There's no. It's not nearly that complicated or anything like that. It's just big dumb fun. You've got ships and you have to have somebody that can call out to the person that's steering the boat because you can't see through the sails, and you have to load these big cartoony cannonballs into the cannons and set the fuses. It's just good dumb fun whenever you have multiplayer going on.
Well, this one, you've got like your engineer station that your engineer is going to be at, and he's got like a circuit board where he's got to keep everything going, and you got the guys with the fire extinguishers when your ship has a fire, or if you have a hole. The cool thing about it is no matter what you're doing on the ship, you can always go outside the ship. If you want to fly off somewhere, or you want to fight with your assault rifle standing on top of the ship while it's flying, you can do that. So I kind of equated it to, because I haven't played Sea of Thieves, I kind of equated it to Ark, kind of mixed with a lot of other survival builder crafter games that you can play.
So while I was watching it, I was surprised because I was watching you play through it, and I think you played like an hour and a half or something like that.
Yeah, I tried to play like the tutorial and then like the first part of the first mission.
So while I was watching that, I was kind of surprised. It was bigger than I expected it to be. It seemed like the scale that was aiming for was larger than I had anticipated, given, I guess, the level of game I was kind of believing it to be, somewhere maybe like a AA kind of release.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, do you know like what sort of scale they're looking to have this thing be in its final form?
I don't know if you saw it towards the very end. I actually opened the star map. And there was like 32 dots, and I thought, well, okay, it's got like 32 planets I go to. I'm in a star system. Those were star systems.
Jeez. So that's impressive.
So it's pretty large. I thought the graphics were impressive. I thought,
Yeah, I was very surprised with the graphics.
and this game, even though I've only brought it up just the past couple weeks, it's actually been getting Steam hype for over a year. People have been following. I've been. It's been on my wish list for since it was announced. Um, so I know a lot of people were waiting for this demo to come out this weekend. So I'm looking forward to it. And it's also coming to console in early access this summer too. So it'll be cool to try it out on there and see how it plays out on there. I did play it in a hybrid format. I used a gamepad and keyboard um, to play because the mouse part of it kind of felt a little bit clunky. So gamepad felt more natural for me. And I do like mouse and keyboard, but the gamepad was nice when it came to flying and just in general. It plays like a regular shooter. So yeah, I did enjoy. I love the little hub world you go back to. It's called the hangar, where you can just kind of hang out and do whatever you got to do upgrades on. It's got a firing range to test out weapons. Um, but man, I think all in all, it looks like it's going to be a decent title. I'd say it's probably a double A.5 if I had to go there, because just based on the presentation and the graphics and the size of the worlds.
Was that one on Future Games? Is that one where that one popped up over the weekend? Or
Yeah, I saw it on Future Games. Yeah, because the guys from Critical Role, Matt Mercer and Laura Bailey, did Future Game Show, and I remember Matt's the one that brought it up as a premiere. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, especially after seeing what you showed, where I was impressed with how big it was. I had a much smaller kind of scale in mind whenever I was thinking about it. So I was impressed. I'm looking forward.
I'm going to curate because Twitch now, once you do a live stream, you've actually got to post it if you want to post like a video, and I'm going to curate that a little bit, because there was a couple times where I was so blown away by the graphics, I was just standing there looking around, and I realized that might not be great for everybody, but I'm old and I like looking around at cool stuff. So, and I wanted to see if there was any secrets, because every little nook and cranny when you're a completionist. And so I'm going to kind of curate the video a little bit and then post it again this week. But yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed playing it, and I'm probably going to go back to it at some point this week.
Well, let's see. I think maybe this would be a good point to jump to this thing. We'll get this one out of the way with Xbox. So Xbox did their showcase, and it was actually a really good showcase. Or I thought it was really good. However, I can certainly understand some of the complaints that a lot of people had. And then once they made them, like, it's like one of those things. While I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, this is good." But then once everybody was like, "Well, where was this game? Well, where was this game?" I was like, "Oh, that's a good point. Actually, there was no updates on Fable. We don't know what's going on with Fable, and a lot of other games where Elder Scrolls 6. Like, we're still like what's the deal? So there's a lot of these things where these really highly anticipated titles we didn't get updates on, but they did show a lot, and some of it was cool. Before we get to the big story, I will say that they ended it with, what's crazy is that the thing that we're about to talk about was not the one more thing. We'll talk about that in a second. That would have been a great one more thing, but their one more thing, it was a trailer, and I was like, okay, so it starts off, and you've got this character. It's an actor that I recognize. I don't know his name. I don't even know where I've seen him before, but I recognized his face. And he's walking into this all white room, very futuristic, very sterile looking, very sci-fi. And I was like, okay. And again, I recognized the actor, and it was very, his likeness was captured perfectly. So I was actually thinking, is this a Quantic Dream game? Because we were just talking about Quantic Dream.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this a Quantic Dream game? Like, I love Quantic Dream games. We'll see what's going on here. And he walks up, and this display, well, not a display, it's like a hologram comes up of this digital woman, like a Cortana, goth Cortana, and with all tattoos or whatever. And she's talking to you. And so I was like, maybe it felt kind of Detroit Become Human from Quantic Dream. And I was into it. And I don't know, there's all this sci-fi stuff. Anyway, me describing it won't do it any justice. But while he's in this very sterile looking room and he's talking to this hologram, a butterfly comes off this hologram and flies onto the window, and it seems to be glitching out. And so he's going to touch it. The window breaks, and then it crushes in with the actual game. and it was Call of Duty Black Ops 7. And I was like,
Are
are you
you-
kidding me?
Are you freaking serious right now?
Yes, I was so disappointed. I was like, I am in. What is this? I want this. And then immediately was like, screw this game. I don't like, I'm over Call of Duty. I am not the Call
Yeah.
of Duty guy. They usually have an entertaining campaign, but those campaigns now, entertaining though they may be, are really short recently. The not Black Ops. What was the one that came out recently where it was like the Vietnam era of Call of Duty?
Was it like Modern Warfare, Cold War, or whatever?
I don't remember what it is. Anyways, that one had a pretty in-depth campaign, but all these Black Ops, like the Black Ops 7s and all this stuff,
Yeah.
they've been really, especially like, what would they call it? Like, wasn't one called Future War or something like that? Or
Well,
I
there
don't
was
Future
Infinite
Warfare.
and and
Anyways,
Advanced Warfare.
I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed that it was Call of Duty because it looked so cool. I was so interested, and then nope, not interested anymore. Don't care.
That's mind blowing, especially since this weekend I was playing a game, and it was called Under the Waves, and I told you, it's like, hey, it's going to remind you of a Quantic Dream game, and then find out it is a Quantic Dream game.
And I will be grabbing that game this weekend as well, for sure.
Yeah, it is legit. I mean, it's made by a company called like Parallel Lives or Parallel Worlds.
Oh, so
but
Quantic Dream is like the publishing arm for them? Okay.
Yes. So, but it was unmistakable. Like I got such serious Indigo Prophecy vibes playing that I mean I couldn't see straight.
Well, speaking of Quantic Dream, and then we'll get back to Xbox, but speaking of Quantic Dream, I was like, because we had that conversation last week on the show, and then you had Under the Waves, and you texted me about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, but that can't be. But of course, now it makes even more sense where Quantic Dream didn't make it, but they published it. So it's like, okay, so they got to be, what are they doing? And I had to look up, like, what is Quantic Dream's next game? And I had completely forgotten this. This is another one that I had completely forgotten about.
Oh, I'm waiting.
Until I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's right. And they are making a Star Wars game in the vein of Quantic Dream. It's called Star Wars Eclipse.
Oh, they're doing Eclipse?
Yep.
Dude, there's been trailers for Eclipse for like 3 years. There's like a dude banging on, big drum cymbals and yeah, I've seen that trailer a bunch of times. Apparently that game is supposed to be a create your own character. It's set in the high age of the Jedi.
Like the High Republic?
Yeah, the High Republic. So that should be, I'm looking forward to that, man. That should be super interesting.
I know a lot of people are critical of Quantic Dream games, and for the most part, that criticism is just because it's not their kind of game. Where it's very, there's a lot of times there can be heavy, like quick time sequences and timing based mini games to get through certain scenes, and a lot of where you're not really doing anything. It's just it's more of a choose your own adventure kind of movie. And so I get if that's not your game, but just don't play it. There's a lot of games like Call of Duty Black Ops 7. I'm just not going to play it. I was disappointed that was not going to be some cool sci-fi RPG.
I equate Quantic Dream with this. They're this era's version of like Riven and Myst, because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had people that loved Riven and Myst and people that hated it. And I was like, just try it out. But once Indigo Prophecy came out, I was like, holy crap, these guys are onto something.
That was the first one that I played that got me super into them, and I started following them ever since that point. And a lot of people will complain if you play RPGs and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, this is certainly a valid argument when it comes to a lot of RPGs, where it will have the illusion of choice in RPGs, where you can make a choice, but then ultimately, once you kind of play through the game, you sort of realize how they would have manipulated it no matter how you... Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, that no matter what choice you made, it wouldn't really have made a difference.
You're still coming to the same point. Yeah. Like the Telltale games do that a lot.
Yeah, so if that kind of thing annoys you, play a Quantic Dream game. Because those choices are cataclysmic in instances. There are entire characters that are, like, Heavy Rain comes to mind. There are multiple primary characters that can simply die and vanish and not be involved throughout the vast majority of the story if you make the wrong decisions. It is insane the level to which your choices matter to the story.
Yeah.
So that's the fun thing about because the replayability is unreal when it comes to a Quantic Dream game. Just because you'll want to know, like, what if I would have done this? Would it have been different? And usually the answer is yes.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
it would have been
absolutely.
different. So I
You know,
love
it's
Quantic
like,
Dream games, and I'm excited to see what they do with Eclipse.
you know, when I played the first Alan Wake, and I have not played the second one, for I feel like a good reason, because I just feel like it's not going to capture the magic of the first one. But and you're probably going to correct me on that, but and rightfully so, I'm sure.
No. I'll tell you my thoughts on it, but no,
Okay.
I'm not gonna.
But you know, I played the first Alan Wake, and just the first 20 minutes, I was like, boy, Quantic Dream really missed out on getting the rights to this, because this is right up their alley. Especially the first time you can't find your wife, and then it switches to the different world, and you're kind of in the dark, and you got the flashlight, and you're walking, and you know, do I shoot this guy? Do I, you know, different things. But I really, really love that story. And again, it was one of those, even though I felt like you're more involved in that than you are in a Quantic Dream game, but it still kind of played that vibe. So I didn't get to play the second one. So did you play the second one?
I did play the second one.
Okay.
So did you play the DLC of the first one?
I did.
Okay. So yeah, I have played the second one. I haven't finished the second one yet, but I have played it, and I believe it's actually on Game Pass. If you want to check it out, I believe it's on Game Pass.
Okay.
But, or at least it was at one point. I don't know if it still is, but at one point it was released on Game Pass. But it's very different in that they don't try to recapture the first one, really. It's a very different mechanic because the circumstances surrounding the second game are very different than the first. So it's going to sound crazy, but I'll just say this. For anybody that's not familiar with Alan Wake, the main character of Alan Wake, whom is Alan Wake, he's an author. So he's a very well-known author. So think somebody like Dan Brown or Stephen King or somebody like that in this world. He's a very well-known author, and he's on vacation, and then weird stuff starts to happen. And basically, spoiler alerts for a 20-something-year-old game.
Yeah.
he by the end of the DLC that you play from the first game, so the first game, then into the DLC, what ultimately ends up happening is he is essentially trapped within the world that he has created in his books. He is essentially locked away in this dream world that he has created within his novels. So the second game picks up with that being the case. So you have Janina Gavankar, whom I love. I love Janina Gavankar. I think she's awesome, fantastic actress, and she's a legit nerd gamer. And she's one of us. And she is the primary protagonist that you play as in the game. But you will alternate to Alan Wake as well. So there are scenes where you are her in the real world, and there are scenes where you are Alan Wake in this weird sort of prison that he's in, this world that he's imagined. And the way that those intersect is really interesting, where you'll have instances where it can kind of swap it between the two, and Alan you'll come up to these boards, and these boards will sort of be scripting ideas about whatever story he's trying to write. He's essentially trying to write his way out of this prison. This sounds, the more I talk, the more I realize that I sound like an insane person. It's like trying to explain the plot of Death Stranding. But essentially, the big gameplay mechanic that makes these two worlds work together is that you can take these several different ideas that appear on these boards and switch them around. So Janita Gavankar is a police officer in the game. And let's say she's in a subway, and she's in the engine room of the subway. So she's investigating the engine room.
Right.
Then if you flip back and you are Alan Wake, and he's in the same area in his dream world, and he's this dream world that he's writing, he can say, "Oh, there was a cult sacrifice, some sort of sacrificial ceremony happened in the engine room," and put that there. And then whenever you go back to the police's perspective, that world has changed, and now the world that she was in is now a crime scene. Now there's a murder that took place in the very place that she is standing.
Does she know that it changed?
She is aware of these. She is the only one that is aware of these changes that are happening to the real world.
Okay.
She can perceive them. And she also, in a very Alan Wake way, I think you'll appreciate it as she goes through. There's some things that you play that seem to be very mundane portions of your playthrough that the more you pay attention, the more it becomes obvious that something is off. And I don't know. It's really interesting. I think you'd enjoy it. So they went for a very different vibe and gameplay mechanic and hook, but it is still very much Alan Wake.
Well, that's good then. I might actually give that a go.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Such afraid that it was not going to.
And maybe that's the thing. Maybe that was kind of why they did it. Maybe they're like, you know what? We can't really recapture or improve on that magic. So let's change the hook. Let's try something different and still give you that same feel, but with a different gameplay experience.
You know, just you talking about the two different worlds that are coexisting, it really makes me feel like for Quantic Dream that Stranger Things is definitely a genre that they could probably adapt into a really good Quantic Dream game.
I am really curious because I'll say it again. I love Quantic Dream, but this Star Wars game is going to be their first licensed property. So I am very interested to see how they play with a licensed property where they actually have some guardrails that they have to abide by. Granted, it's the High Republic, so those guardrails are much lower than they would be for something that actually intersected with the original trilogy or something like that. Right. So that's probably the reason that it is set in a timeline that doesn't really touch any of the more well-known stuff, is so they can go crazy with it. But I'm very curious to see what they do with those, especially something like, because as we said, it's not an action-forward franchise.
Right.
So now you're in a world where there's lightsabers and all this stuff. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do with the gameplay. But I love Quantic Dream, and I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, me too, man. I did not play Heavy Rain, but I've played pretty much every other game they've released.
Dude, you gotta play.
Well, Heavy Rain, I can do it. I have access to it on like 2 different systems without having to pay for it up front. So Heavy Rain is going to be right up your alley, dude. Okay, I'll definitely give that a try then.
Yeah, Heavy Rain's awesome.
But we did have one more piece of Xbox information because it was a super misleading news story.
Do you want to say it? Do you want to say the thing?
Say what thing?
Console war.
Console. So here it is. I'm just going to add this to the stage. I got a text tonight about 2 hours before the show saying this is canceled. I laughed, and then I immediately tried to find a screenshot to add to the show for tonight. And there's a lot of you out there maybe that already have pre-ordered the Asus Rogue version, but this is misleading because this is the original Xbox handheld that was announced. When was it announced? Like 2 years ago?
It was never actually officially announced.
Yeah.
They were working internally on their own internal machine, which was in fact canceled.
Right.
They abandoned work on their internal Microsoft manufactured handheld. However,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that in the Xbox showcase, they went with what we had actually talked about on a previous episode, where there's a leak of the Xbox handheld. You'll remember that we spoke about that, where it mentioned the follow-up of the Asus ROG Ally, and it had and it turned out that was exactly what it was. The images were exactly what it was. The button placement, there's a new Xbox button, so that's what it is. They announced the fantastic name, flows right off the tongue, the Asus ROG Xbox Ally X. Hope there's a better name for that we can shorten it to. But there it is. That is the device, and it is officially confirmed and actually could be a game changer. Not necessarily the device itself, which the device itself is great and something very interesting, but the ramifications of what this device lets us know. And this is another thing that we talked about on a previous episode is Xbox's strategy moving forward. Of course, we know that they are killing it when it comes to services and software and that kind of thing. And we had mentioned these rumors that have been going for a while of Steam interoperability, where you were going to be able to supposedly play your Steam library on your Xbox devices because people would get these insider beta versions of Xbox systems updates, and they would see a Steam logo or something like that. And the ROG Xbox Ally X has confirmed all of that and more. It combines so you not only have your full Xbox library, it includes your Steam library, your Epic Games library, your GOG library. It has everything on this. And even crazier, because this is one thing that people are speculating. So Helldivers 2 was a console exclusive for PlayStation, but PlayStation made it available on Steam, so PC players could play it. And there had been speculation that if this integration were to happen with Xbox, that they would disallow play of Helldivers 2 on Xbox via the Steam compatibility. And people played Helldivers 2 on the Xbox ROG, and it worked. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal. So the way that Netflix won the video rental war with Blockbuster and Movie Gallery and all these places is that they didn't try to be a video rental. They stopped doing the video rental thing and they tried something else that disrupted the market. And so instead of Xbox trying to fight the console war, they have essentially said, no, we're going to give you not to pardon the pun, we're going to give you a window, right? And so it's not that Windows, but we're going to give you a window where you can play everything. So they're basically superseding the console war. They're going to say, hey, we've got a thing where you can play everything. You want to play everything on the go? Here's a handheld that'll let you play everything on the go. You want to play everything in front of your TV? Here's a console that'll let you play everything in front of your TV. You want to play everything on your computer? Well, here's your way to play everything on the computer. So they're essentially not doing the console war. They're just giving you a service that you can access, whether it's handheld, console, PC, anything.
Yeah, and I put up a comparison picture with the Steam Deck because naturally I feel like this is what it's going to be compared to the most. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And it's actually more powerful than the Steam Deck currently, which the Steam Deck's been around for a long time. Obviously, this is something that Skillup was mentioning whenever just earlier today, he dropped his sort of initial impressions of his hands-on with the Xbox ROG Ally. And this one in the picture is the original ROG.
Yeah.
The Xbox ROG is even more ergonomic. He said it felt great.
Yeah, it's got
with the grips, and the specs are even higher than the original Ally, which you would expect. And he said that essentially the original Steam Deck, while it is a great device, is several years old at this point. It's been around for a while and they haven't updated the specs. And so there's a lot of games now that are coming out and just, I mean, as it happens, especially in the PC market where things move so quickly, it's not able to do as much with these newer games. You got to like crank them down a bit to play them on the Steam Deck. Whereas the ROG Ally is going to be the most powerful Steam Deck adjacent device on the market at the time. And given that it's going to play all of these things, it's going to be, and the usability of the original is going to be, or in compared to the original ROG, is going to be even better because the original ROG just ran straight up Windows 11, and
Yeah.
that was apparently incredibly unwieldy on a handheld, which I can imagine. And so the new one is going to be running a custom version of Windows where it's made for this. It's made to be on a handheld device, and it doesn't load everything all at once. It doesn't load the search bar until you need the search bar, and then it will come up. So it's freeing up a lot of memory and resources by not
Prioritization.
loading all these background things up that you're not even using. So it's I'm actually really impressed
Yeah.
with
And,
not just the device but the approach.
yeah. And the only way, like with Steam Deck, that you can play Game Pass is through the cloud streaming of an Xbox game, or an Xbox or a PC game rather too. But yeah, this I really like the look of this. I think it's sleek. I like that they went with full size analog sticks instead of depressed analog sticks. The triggers on the video I watched at the showcase, the analog triggers look like they were um, full on triggers. So I feel like they're going in the right direction for this. That, for me, the big deal is going to be, which oddly enough, I'm never a frame rate guy, but is going to be its ability to prioritize back end systems that have to run. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yep.
and to see how far they can go into their respective libraries to access games that are going to be playable. One thing I think the Steam Deck does really well, and I think Steam does really well, is they don't pull any punches on telling you which games will work on Steam and which ones won't. When you go on there and it says this is a Steam Deck certified game, that means it can run at a decent amount of settings. And they also give suggested settings. But if something won't run, they'll flat out tell you, do not try to run this on Steam Deck. So I hope Microsoft does take that same approach when they launch this device.
I'm sure that they will, especially given that this is the second time out for Asus, and now they're working together with this successful thing. So I'm sure that'll be a factor. And then, like I said, the larger implications of their overall strategy. That's the big thing to take away from this is what kind of impact will that have on the console war? Whenever, like I thought last time, I was like, okay, there's not going to be, obviously there's always going to be a next Xbox, but I didn't think that there was going to be some big Xbox that they were going to really push forward and market. I thought it was just going to be sort of a means to an end. Hey, if
Right.
you want your Xbox stuff on this here, you buy this thing and do that. Because I know there's been a rumor for a long time that they were going to do this, like a dongle or something like that for Xbox, where you just plugged it into your TV and that's it, and you're essentially doing cloud gaming. Like there's nothing
Right.
downloaded or anything like that. It's just a means to do cloud gaming. I thought maybe they might even go full bore into that, but this does change the equation quite a bit. And the fact that it's not just integrated with Steam, but it's integrated with Epic and all these other things, which again, Epic has free games every month. Steam has insane sales. There will be games that the Steam version of the games will be sold cheaper than the console versions. If this runs everything really well, if these games can be optimized on whatever the next gen hardware is, this is going to be a really good deal. If the price of the console is there, and then with Sony moving some of their first party games and allowing them to be on Steam, if they still continue on with that, and this allows you to then play those games via their Steam versions on Xbox hardware,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bold move. That's a
Well, man,
bold move.
I got to tell you, when you're talking about somebody that games on whatever system they game on and they're considering something else or whatever, real quick, funny story. So I bought a Samsung TV a couple years ago, and it comes with Xbox as an app. And I was like, I let it set for literally a year, never clicked on it. Finally decided to click on it. It was like, play your favorite Xbox games right here. And I was like, what is this? I still thought Xbox Live was a thing. Apparently, it wasn't. And I'm like, what's this Game Pass stuff? And they're like, hey, get 1 free month of Ultimate Game Pass. I'm like, okay. Huge fan of aviation games. Downloaded the client for Microsoft Flight Simulator on my TV. And I'm playing Microsoft Flight Simulator on my TV. And that was the impetus that drove me to build a PC. So for all its faults, stream gaming or what Xbox is doing, they got me hook, line, and sinker, man. As soon as I was like, okay, I got to see what this looks like on a computer, and that's what led to that. So, and what led to becoming a Game Pass member, and then still having access to all the games I had when I was on the 360. So that was really cool. So yeah, I think that's the type of forward thinking, regardless of them raising their console price. I think that's the forward thinking that's going to drive gamers to those venues, to the handheld, and to Game Pass.
Well, and that's the thing is like they are allowing you. That's what I said. Like they're allowing you access to the library. So whenever if you buy the handheld, you are not. You don't have to worry about what games are there going to be. Like, you buy the Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, what games are out? What games are coming out?
Right.
All this stuff. That you know what's going to be there. It's going to be everything. It's going to be all the stuff you already know you have. It's going to be all the stuff that you already know what's going to come out. Whatever's coming out on Xbox, you're going to have access to it there. And it really is. It does change. Like, obviously, this generation they've lost. They've lost the console war as far as this generation goes. That's been a foregone conclusion for a long time. It was not going to happen. And then with them raising the price, if you're getting a current gen console, get a PlayStation 5. That's the best way to go.
Yeah.
But going forward, this is one thing that it's very bold. And previously, when they'd done some things that were bold and actually forward thinking, they backtracked on them. Whenever the Xbox One came out back in the day, which was where they shot themselves in the foot. But some of the things they did were actually really forward focused and progressive. Things like the push for their digital stuff and all of this and them wanting to get away from or focusing on, they still left the ability to have the physical games, but really making this push towards digital and having things there, and everybody resisted. But that's where we are. Like now, most games that are purchased are digital purchases. They were very forward thinking of these things. They backtracked on a lot of them, and hopefully this one is one where they're like, hey, the next gen hasn't even started yet, and we're already staking our flag. This is our approach, so that now whenever it releases, what are you going to have on day one? Well, do you have a Steam library? Because you're going to have access to all that.
Yeah,
it's really, like I said, it's bold. It could be a tide turner.
Yeah,
especially if it's any sort of exclusive agreement with Steam or Epic or something like that, where PlayStation couldn't get the same treatment.
And I think if you have access to it, and you can get access to it, it will change the landscape for sure.
So very, very impressive outing from Xbox as far as that goes. Not just because the hardware itself looks great. So far, it's getting very positively reviewed on. Of course, it's not out yet. It's just hands-on. People went to the event,
right,
and they got to have some hands-on time with it. But so far, very positively received. And yeah, the implications though are pretty momentous, and what it could mean for the console war going forward. Let's see. Let's go ahead and move into another one. We'll get this out of the way. So we talked a little bit about 007 earlier with the signing up to get the free skin. Yeah. Well, here we go with 007. So IO Interactive had their showcase on Friday night. And the showcase was for two really awesome things and and one that wasn't. So
we got kind of bent over on that, dude. That was a
so they had it was for this Hitman extension, this new episode of Hitman, this elusive target where they incorporated Le Chiffre from Casino Royale, from Daniel Craig's James Bond era. And Mads Mikkelsen reprising that role. It is him doing the voice and all that stuff. And so that's super awesome. I have not gotten the chance to play it yet. I know Jay has.
Yes.
I'm sure we'll talk about that momentarily. You get your initial thoughts on it. But so they talked about this. They talked about the game 007 First Light, and they talked about Mind's Eye. Now I want to get out there because we all know that Mind's Eye is a shit show. It is one of the.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I kept seeing it come around like on my feeds for everything for months, and I'm like, I finally decided to watch a trailer. I'm like, well, the trailer looks good. It's kind of empty.
So,
but I didn't know the launch was bad.
Oh yeah, and it had been.
Well,
it had
let's
been,
take this off because I don't want to talk about good stuff while something.
A few weeks before this released, stuff started to come out about. Now, I will get one thing out of the
Mind's Eye.
Okay, so I will get this out of the way just to make this clear for everybody listening. IO Interactive did not make Mind's Eye. They have started a publishing arm. They are the publishers of Mind's Eye. They are not the developers of Mind's Eye. Mind's Eye was developed by a company called Build a Rocket Boy, which is headed by Leslie Benzies. It was created by Leslie Benzies, which you will know from Grand Theft Auto fame. He is one of the guys behind Grand Theft Auto and all that, and did a lot of great stuff there. So the game looks great, like the facial capture, all that stuff. It looks crazy, but it is bug riddled, and there were events and little previews that certain influencers and people got access to weeks before the release that were absolutely nightmarish, where there was a presentation that apparently happened where it wasn't recorded, but it was done for certain publications and influencers, where they watched them play through Mind's Eye, and the developers actually had to turn on God mode to progress through the level that they were showing, because they were not able to otherwise because of everything that was going wrong with it. So they had to make themselves essentially invincible to get through the levels that they were showing. There was a lot going on, and they're making tweaks. It's a real shame, because obviously Leslie Benzies has a legendary career with Rockstar, and IO, this being, I believe, their first game that they're publishing that they didn't make. Oof,
right.
That's a rough start. Hopefully they can pull it out.
On the game cover, it says IOI partners.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, we didn't do this. This is not us.
Yeah. Go ahead. Say whatever else you might want to. I'm trying to fight off this sneeze.
Okay. So just looking at it, to me, it looked like some type of hybrid cross between GTA and Cyberpunk. It was like that period of time.
That is essentially what it is.
Before we made full on Cyberpunk, we're kind of in this halfway. We're still using ballistic weapons, and we don't have augments in our skin yet, but still, this is very futuristic. We've got drones and robots everywhere.
Yeah,
skyscrapers galore.
And if you watch some of these influencers, if you go on YouTube and you watch some of these playthroughs, like the AI is atrocious. It's bad. Now, it's one of those things where it's perhaps much like Cyberpunk, maybe through diligent work and a lot of patches, maybe it could become something. But right now, it ain't it.
This studio doesn't have the pedigree of a CD Projekt Red.
No. This is their, like, Leslie Benzies has that pedigree, but the company that he founded does not.
Right.
And this is their first game. So, and also, I don't know, did you happen to watch the IOI showcase, Jay?
I did not. I was trying to avoid it in case I wanted to play this. So I watched like a 2-minute mission where the guy, he's driving down the road and then he has to pull over because he's getting shot at, and then he assaults his way through these bad guys, and that was it. That's all I've seen on it.
So we can move on from Mind's Eye and just say right now it's bad. That was one of their things that they talked about. They plugged at their little showcase, but I will say that IOI and their showcase, their content was fine on what they showed, but that showcase was really poorly run. It was in a hotel. It was in front of a crowd of people, publishers, influencers, all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure it was fine for them, but the video quality, the audio quality. It was very poorly rehearsed. It was just not good streamed over. It was basically, it felt like it was just like a camera set up in the corner of some like corporate retreat. And the audio that you got was the audio that came through the camera.
Oh
And,
God.
and then whenever somebody's speaking into the microphone, you're getting the sound that's coming out of the speakers next to the stage that are then coming through the camera. It was bad. It was bad.
Yeah.
So hopefully they either just stick with piggybacking on other people's showcases, or they get somebody to do it for them, like have a planner or something like that. But anyways, one thing that they did focus on, and I guess we can we'll start with 007, then I guess we can go into your thoughts on Le Chiffre.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk about some 007 stuff. So they ended up showing what we'd already seen of 007. Nothing new as far as what they showed. We were told that there was going to be gameplay. There was not. Now, I do want to recap a few things from what we have already seen within the trailer, because we were really talking about what will this entail last show, but covered some more. Want to just get some smaller details out there that I don't want to be lost while we talk about this. So there is a tagline that goes along with 007 First Light, and that is "Earn the Number." So it is 007 First Light, earn the number. So again, you are not 007 at the start of this game. You have to become 007. You have to earn the 007 number. You are getting into it. Go for it.
To be fair, Daniel Craig was also not 007 at the beginning of Casino Royale.
Yes.
Because it takes 2 kills.
And the second one is much easier.
And the second one, yes, considerably.
So, yeah, you are becoming him. And in the trailer, which is a great trailer.
Yeah, it's a wonderful trailer.
Great trailer. Definitely has all the vibes that you hope from a 007 game. We do see some things. Jay and I talked about their pedigree as this Hitman developer and what kind of happens there. Well, in the trailer, you see a bunch of interesting things. You obviously see a lot of characters. Excuse me. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I'm ill. But you see a bunch of characters from their story, and the graphics are great. You also see him doing a running move, sliding behind cover and taking shots at targets, indicating a focus on gunplay that we've not seen before from IO. And there is also, looking at it, I've watched it several times now, there's also a little bit where you got to see him doing a pickpocket somebody in that. And that's a thing where before, back in the day, this was a thing that would be very common in video games, is where if you needed to do something that you didn't actually have the ability to do in game, they would just do it in the cutscene so that you didn't have to worry about it, and they didn't have to figure out how to make it work in the game. That doesn't really fly so much anymore. So that makes me think that we will have the ability, in game, to pickpocket things.
Right.
If need be. I don't think that they would have. I don't think that they're going to do the thing where it's like, oh, we'll have him pickpocket in the cutscene so that we don't have to worry about it, for gameplay. I don't think they're going to do that. So I think there'll be some pickpocketing going on, that kind of stuff. But there was driving. So that's kind of what we saw. If you haven't seen the trailer, watch the trailer. It's great. But we speculated on some of the things, and after this presentation, the showcase that they did, some publications got the chance to talk to various people, in the company and in the development, to talk about the game. So there was quite a bit of information that came out there. So they said that basically it would be a mix of linear and sandbox, where they said, obviously we have a lineage that we with Hitman and what we've established there with these sandboxes, and we're obviously going to lean into that, which we said, of course, why would you not? That's what got you the shot at 007, is what you did with Hitman. So they are going to have sandboxes, but they're also going to have linear levels as well, which also makes sense, because they're in Hitman, you aren't really driving a story. You're given missions that you complete, but you're not trying to drive a narrative that way. It's a different way to drive a narrative. So as James Bond, it's not mission, mission, mission. as we've said, you appear to be chasing 009, and that appears to be the crux of the game.
The end game.
So so they said that there's going to be set pieces, and obviously, if it was just a sandbox, you would be able to get around those set pieces. So they said there'll be some sandbox stuff, and there'll be some things where we have to move the narrative forward. So things have to go a very particular way in order for that narrative to go down the way that we want it to go, or we need to move you into a very specific set piece that we want to make a big thing. And they also mentioned some of the things that those will entail, some of the things that they're adding. And these are also things that we speculated. So they talked about the things that they're really having to focus on developing that they previously either hadn't done or had not been big focuses. One of the things that they straight up had not done was driving. I mean, we saw these amazing cars in the trailer, and they will be drivable. So they will have moments where you'll be driving a vehicle, and they had to focus on driving. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, and here's my thing with the driving piece too. Even if it turned out to be like an on rails segment where the car's on rails and the only thing you're really in control of is shooting out the window or whatever it is you're doing, I'm actually okay with that as long as the narrative is good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Story's good. And I would figure that this is probably going to be one of the ways that they probably. I assume that there'll be some car chases.
Yeah.
Got to be, right? It's James Bond. I assume there'll be some car chases, or that it might also be a way to get from perhaps one sandbox to another, that where it's like, oh, drive from here, go to here. I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, they're going to have those. And they also mentioned as well a focus on shooting, which we had mentioned in a previous episode, that's one thing where in Hitman, it was never a big focus on Hitman. If you got into a firefight, it was a bit janky and weird, and that's because
go your way.
Yeah, because they didn't focus on it, because like in the terminology that one of the people said in an interview, whenever one outlet was interviewing someone, is the person said, like, it was essentially considered a fail state in Hitman. If it had reduced to a gunfight, that's essentially a fail state, which Jay and I had mentioned, because it's like once it breaks down to a gunfight, you've essentially lost. You're not getting away with it. You're not winning. Right. It's over. So it was never a focus because it's considered a fail state. Why invest resources into a fail state? So really, whenever it comes to Hitman, ideally there's one bullet fired in a mission at most, and that's the bullet from you to a target, and then you just get out. You get out unnoticed, and that's it. So they said that gunplay was obviously going to be a very big focus, where James Bond does get into gunfights. And they said, we don't want it to be just shooting, but obviously shooting is going to be a very big aspect of it. It's going to be
especially a James Bond that's not quite yet 007. He's going to be rough around the edges. He's going to shoot first and ask later.
Yeah, which there's some stuff I want to talk about there momentarily as well. But yeah, they mentioned, that, hey, when stealth fails, shooting will be a thing, and it'll be a viable option. So, and like I said, from that trailer, obviously this was not a gameplay trailer. It was the cut scenes and things like that. But since we saw him run, slide into cover, pop out from cover, take shots at targets, I assume that will be much what they're targeting for the actual gameplay itself. Yeah. That there will be cover-based fire and running and gunning, that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to that. Very exciting to know that that's a big focus, and we know that they've been working on this thing for years. So it's looking good there. And then they also mentioned something that Jay had alluded to as well in the previous episode, which was James Bond is just a different beast than Hitman. Hitman, or Agent 47, I should say. But Agent 47 is very cold, calculated. It is a chess game. You are meticulously setting up, or especially if it's a mission that you have done multiple times. But the whole thing about Hitman is that half the mission is done before you even start it. And in your calculation of like, where am I dropping in? What do I want to put in what part of the map? How do I want to go about this? How am I going to access my target? And it's a chess game, and you're very carefully moving around and doing that. So that's 47. Whereas James Bond is much more shoot first, ask questions later. Okay, something went wrong. What's around me? Let me grab something near me. Now that's what I'm doing. It's very much use what is around you when stuff doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, and take it from there. And they said they're going to be leaning very heavy into that, which I am very curious to see what that means. I'm hoping we get some stuff where you can like grab a bottle of champagne off a table and swing it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have access to organic items within the scene, that would be great. I also noticed, having watched the trailer myself 10 or 11 times, I had mentioned, wonder if they're going to use seduction as a tool. And it looked like there was a seduction mission that sort of played out during the trailer, which I thought was cool too, because you can't have Bond without the Bond girl. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well. It also looked like at the beginning of the trailer where M is basically reading James's CV, and her right-hand person, Agent Greenlee or Greenway or whatever, is in the room, and he's a very famous actor as well. He's the one that's like, no, dude, no. Everything she's like, hey, he went on this mission and he came back with this. Yes, but he also did this. Well, then he went on this mission and he did, yes, but he also, and plus all the commanders that he's been under have retired and turned in, So I'm kind of looking forward. He's obviously going to be super brash at the beginning of the game, and I feel like we're not going to get the James Bond that we know and love until the very last scene. And I'm okay with that. That's fine, because we're building on something, right? So it's one of those things where I'm really looking forward to seeing his progression over the course of this first one.
And one thing about that, before I move on to some of the other things that they talked about, that I am intrigued with this version of James Bond, is that whenever you watch the trailer, especially towards the end, he has a very noticeable scar on his face that goes across his cheek, and as James Bond, which is a new thing. So, because he's very much a ladies' man, he's very dapper, he's very debonair. He looks great in a suit. This whole thing, and so I'm wondering, what does a scarred James Bond, does that make him even more mysterious? As this guy, or what's going on there? So, having this face scar, I think, is actually going to be a really interesting aspect to the character and the way that people interact with him. I don't know. It just seems like that's something that we have not seen, where we actually have a visibly battle scarred guy. So there's no tux that you can put on where people aren't going to notice that you have a slash down your cheek.
Yeah, true. And it'll probably be something like in his final fight with 009. And that's his lesson learned that converts him to 007 status. But I feel I'd bet you all the money in your pocket versus all the money in mine that he will not be 007 till the end of this game.
Yeah, we'll see, because I do wonder if the same rules will apply, like if he has to have 2 kills or whatever. Because I'm very curious as to how they will do it. But I do like that it will be a ground up 007. Obviously, they intend for this thing to be multiple games, and to start where they have their own continuity. It's not tying it. They've already confirmed this does not tie into any of the existing movie franchises or anything like that. Is going to be its own continuity. So I like that. There's no required reading beforehand. There's no boundary that they have to play within to connect it to something that's already happened in the future or anything like that. So I like that aspect is there.
Here's another piece. IOI has access of this license for now. They're kind of known for their episodic content. I mean, Hitman has a ridiculous amount of episodic content. And now I brought this up last week, and we both did, but wonder how much freedom they're going to have to do Bond episodes that, because the Hitman DLC doesn't really have anything to do with the main story. I mean, they're just these kind of standalone pieces that form Agent 47's resume. So I'm wondering if we'll get some classic Bond tales, dude. I mean, we could potentially get a GoldenEye episode or a whatever.
I think that they're probably gonna. I think that they've got to do something like that because there is this expectation now. Whenever it comes to Hitman, we have these elusive targets, and they've mentioned that they're going to be leaning into the sandbox play. Obviously, we'll have some linear play and that kind of stuff. They're going to be leaning into the sandboxes, and I would wager that these sandboxes will be very replayable. I think that you'll be able to do a lot of different things there.
Yeah.
And I fully expect them to have some equivalent to like elusive targets or things like that. So even if it's something as small as that, which they do have, even whenever it's an elusive target, they do have their own little storyline that they do. They have their own little reason that they're in that area. But if they did something even more elaborate than that, that would be awesome. And I do want to mention two more things before we go too far down that rabbit hole, just because they might play into it. One thing that they mentioned during these interviews, somebody, I don't remember the exact wording that the person used, but he did mention that the player would need to essentially rely on the relationships with these other characters. And that the way that it was worded was very interesting. And not just that, oh yeah, there'll be other characters that will be very involved in the story, but the fact they said relationships with those characters. So will there be some level of choice and I don't know, interactivity or something like whenever it comes to those around you that can influence their opinion of you that could be different in your game than it would be in mine.
Well, I mean, you look at James Bond, and everybody knows Moneypenny and M and Q and those cats, but the history of James Bond, Felix Leiter, the CIA agent who's in like every movie, has been played by 20 different people, but he's in every movie. And that is definitely my friend across the pond, but we're good, close, tight together. But then you look at people like Valentine from the Pierce Brosnan era, played by Robbie Coltrane, that played Hagrid, where he hates him. I mean, they're not friends, but he's a means to an end a lot of times. So I'm hoping they're talking about people like that he's ran into.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's going to be a part of it, but it's just the fact that he just didn't say just there will be other characters that you'll need to rely on, but the fact that he mentioned that you will need to rely on your relationships with other characters, that makes it sound very much like you will have some level of influence over what that relationship could be,
Very
whether
Mass
it is
Effect
strained or copacetic.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was they addressed the humor, and they mentioned that IO is based in Denmark, and they say like, hey, we love humor and something that we work into our games, and they do have humor in Hitman, but that humor is more kind of true to the Denmark sort of version of humor. It's very absurdist. You have, they use the example of walking around in a flamingo costume, as Agent 47 to get where you're going and stuff like that, which is ridiculous. Or beating someone with,
a rubber duck
chicken or have an exploding apple or whatever, this ridiculous stuff. And they said like, we do we enjoy humor and we want humor to be in the games. And there is a lot of humor in James Bond, but they said that humor is very British. So we had to, the same type of humor that's in Hitman will not be in 007. It will be a British humor. So we will probably get a lot more of this dry wit and things like that. So they very much want to get away from the fears or assumptions, would maybe be a better word, that a lot of people would have, that it's just going to be a copy paste, James Bond's face on Agent 47. They're really trying to make it its own thing. So down to the humor. So it'll have its own humor. He'll have gunplay, and that'll be a more focused part of the game. There'll be cars. So they're really doing their best to have it be its own thing while still using their strength that they have with these incredibly deep interactive sandboxes within Hitman. So I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, me too, man. And talking to humor, I always feel like that whichever movie you watch, it's always the segment where Bond visits Q. That is always the big humor piece. And the famous line that Q always says before Bond walks out, please remember 007, bring it back in one piece, or stuff like that. Or Ben Wishaw's character in the Daniel Craig, when he has the little box and he opens it and it's just a little box with an antenna on it. And he's like, we call it a radio. Just
Well,
little, and that's British humor, man. That's British dry humor. It's all it is.
and I will say, judging by the performance of our video from last time regarding 007, while we are excited about this, it would appear that many out there are not. However, we will continue to follow this very closely because we are so excited about it. So it'll be a fixture as we get more and we learn more about the development of it. We're going to continue to come back to it because we do love it. We're super excited for it, so we're going to continue to follow it. So now, the last IOI bit, like we mentioned, the Shifra. At the State of Play, they announced, the IOI was there, and they announced this new elusive target for Hitman and their World of Assassination platform. And that new, as we mentioned before, that was going to be the return of Le Chiffre as an elusive target, and the return of Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre. And then they did the, boss mic drop move of, and that's available today. And they dropped it, and I have not gotten to play it, but Jay has.
So this obviously takes place prior to Casino Royale. And the screenshot I have here is at the actual poker tournament. By the way, 90% of the mission happens before this poker game. So the biggest piece of this is just getting you into the poker game. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are any number of contacts that you can make
in true Hitman style.
Yeah, that can get you an invite to this poker private poker match with Le Chiffre. And you can pick how you want to do it or not do it or whatever you want to do. But eventually you get here. And at this point, it basically plays out exactly like the movie. If you can remember, so I'm not technically spoiling anything. If you can remember how the poker game goes in the movie, all the different rounds of the poker game, there were many.
Do you ever have to change your shirt?
They had breaks, and there was clothing changes. There was a lot of different things.
So I guess it's safe to say that I'm guessing this is the most elaborate elusive target that they've had.
Without a doubt, yeah. So they do reuse a map. They use the Showstopper map in Paris, where the fashion show was, but it's a totally different. The rooms are totally different. They're laid out different. In fact, in this room is where the auction was held in Showstopper, where if you ever made it to the auction, because again, Agent 47 always has 47 different ways to take his targets out. But there was a like an arms auction that took place in this room in the original game. So you're chasing these contacts down, and Le Chiffre, of course, is in trouble. The reason he's hosting the poker match, much like Casino Royale, is he's lost a Bolivian crime lord's money. And he's had to host,
as he is wont to do.
Yeah, it's his MO, man. So that's how you have to, get into the poker match or whatever. And then there's a time sequence, and then there's, just like in the movie, there's a segment where you're not in control of your own body. You are tied to a chair, and I'm just going to leave.
Do you have associates that you can sort of rely on for information during the game?
You have one.
Okay.
And I'm just going to leave it at that. And it's, I was technically not going to leave it at that, but I am going to leave it at that. So you have one. Plus you have what's her name in your ear still.
Your handler.
But that's all you've got. And then it's a great mission, dude. It's not very long. You could probably play, if you know where you're going and what you're doing, or if you decide to secure your game invite from the first person you run into, then this potentially could be done in 30 minutes.
So at the IO Interactive Showcase, that one of the developers actually mentioned this to somebody that was talking to them, and they actually mentioned that being one of the love-hate or the heartaches that comes from working on these elusive targets, especially one of this size where you spend all this time and we're talking months, at least months of development and all this stuff, and of course something like this big where you have Mads Mikkelsen reprising this role. Of course,
Right.
obviously all the others were big deals too, because you got Sean Bean and all this stuff. It's these big actors and this whole thing, and you spend all this time crafting this thing, and he's like, and there's somebody that's going to get it done in 15 seconds. Like they're going to speed run this thing, and you built in all these little things where, like, hey, did you know that if you go into the third bedroom from the right and you do this and you do that, that you can do this, and you can grab a shirt that'll let you go here, and then you can do that. And then there's somebody that's just going to like walk up to the balcony, throw a grenade, and walk away, and they're just going to get in a boat and go. And like all of that's going on, but he's like, that's just part of the deal. You gotta accept that some people are just gonna get it done and go. But I love the fact that they spend so much time to make it this elaborate thing, because that means that it could be as long as you really want it to be. You could either spend an hour in this world that they've created, getting to figure out all the different people that have ties to this game and deciding which one you want to get into, or you could just be the agent of chaos and pull the pin and throw it in the room.
One thing I do love, and I think you'll love this too, is you're not on a time hack for this game. For this mission. This mission, the poker game, is what I'm calling the mission, but that does not start until you've secured your invite. So literally, when I loaded in the first time, I was trying it to fail. So I assumed once I got in there that the game was going to start in a few minutes and I needed to get my invite. But I played it the first time to fail. So I went around and talked to every single contact to see what their angle was. There's a huge Easter egg, by the way, and I'm not going to ruin it, if you go to the bar. There's a lady you meet on the porch, and then you can follow her to the bar. And there's a great Casino Royale Easter egg in there. So you definitely want to do that. And if you do play it, I want to hear about it. If you
no, I'm going to be playing it.
I'm
going to be playing it.
So I definitely don't want to ruin it, because it was a really cool moment in the movie when he first they first took their first little break at the table. So and Eva Green's character had walked in. That's the part I'm talking about, in that area. So I was actually pretty excited about playing it. Mads Mikkelsen does a good job. It doesn't seem like he phoned it in. He uses some of his same lines from the movie, and he delivered them perfect. So it was very well done. I do wish they would have used a different map. I feel like they kind of cheated us by just doing a retread on Paris, but I love this map already, so I didn't really complain that much. But it would have been nice if it was in Montenegro at Casino Royale. That would have been cool.
Well, I'm looking forward to playing it. And whenever I go into these sandbox missions in Hitman games, and like I was telling Jay before we started the show, I had done my initial playthroughs of 1, 2, and 3 on Xbox. So all my lived history on the modern Hitman games is on Xbox, but I now primarily, my console of choice, because that's where all my friends are, is PlayStation. So currently, if you're listening to this right now, there's a sale on the craziest edition of the Hitman World of Assassination, where it's essentially like half off for like the $100 version. And I got that. So I need to work my way through the different missions to get to that. Or I don't know how long this will be there. So I might just have to like break down, load it up on Xbox just so I can play it through at least once and then get to it the other way. But so I'm stoked about that. And I do, speaking of Mads Mikkelsen, I do want to cover this real quick before we get into some of this other stuff that we have planned. But one of the other things on the weekend, since we're talking about all these different showcases, so we had the Death Stranding showcase, we'll call it, at the Orpheum Theater. And we had a lot of the actors, and we had the composer, and we had, of course, Hideo Kojima. And who else would host Hideo Kojima? It's got to be Keighley. So Jeff Keighley was the host. And we got to look at some new footage from the game and hear some thoughts from the actors, and got to look at some gameplay, and there was a lot there. There was one thing where they had Elle Fanning. Her new character there is called Tomorrow, and they did have a feature, and I don't know if this is a thing that you know before in the story or what. So Jay has not seen it, so I guess I don't want to spoil anything for him. So
no,
they
it's
did.
fine. Go for it. It's
So they introduced her character, which I had seen her and I knew Elle Fanning was there, but you have no idea what her character is, and honestly, you still have no idea what's going on with her character. But they showed a scene where you basically get to see this ability that she has,
right.
where they're surrounded, like Sam's there, and they've got all these enemies around them, and she goes ahead and she like pulls her hair. I think she puts it in a ponytail. I can't remember if she took it down or put it up. I think she takes it back and puts it in a ponytail, and then she you see black tar rise up, and then she just sinks into the ground, and then she pops back up. She attacks somebody, and then sinks back into the ground, and pops back up. So she essentially has the ability to travel between the two worlds, and
that would be huge.
Yes. So how that works into the story. Yeah, how that works into the story, who knows? But that was huge. That was a huge thing so she is clearly going to be a very interesting, very integral character to whatever's going on in Death Stranding 2. And then we also got to see a lot of they have a new gameplay trailer as well. So if you want to see a few minutes of gameplay, you can go and you can look at the gameplay trailer. And they showed a lot of stuff that actually really has me excited. So they've introduced natural disasters. So now, whenever you're walking, there will be earthquakes. And those earthquakes, whenever they happen, you'll have to steady yourself. Otherwise, you'll fall, and then you could lose packages. So there will be now earthquakes of varying levels of severity.
Man, I did not need earthquakes. I could have fallen over on steady ground. I did it all the time.
Well, it gets better. So
great.
Those earthquakes can then cause other things to happen.
I don't want you to spoil it.
So those earthquakes can cause other things to happen. Those earthquakes, if you're walking around snow-capped mountains and you get an earthquake, that can start an avalanche. If you're walking around in a canyon, that can start a rock slide. You now so you have earthquakes, rock slides, avalanches. You also have floods. Things can flood. So whenever it rains, it can flood. And they also showed a sequence where he was coming up on a river. He was trying to figure out how he's about to walk across this river.
Can you still scan?
Yeah. Okay. Scanning's still a thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so he's at this river, and the way that they have the camera positioned, it's coming from his profile, and so you can see the river going upstream, and all of a sudden you see this water crest over and it just takes him out. And because the river flooded upstream, and it just had this massive wave come down. So that also makes me wonder if there's going to be dams that we will need to build or have the option to build to keep things from doing that. So I don't know. That was one thing I immediately thought. I was like, I wonder if we're going to build dams. But so they had that, and they also have fire. So lightning can strike and start fires, all sorts of stuff. And then in the presentation, the way that Kojima, or at least his interpreter, talked about boss fights. I don't know if it's just for one particular boss or what, but it very much sounded like different boss fights would be essentially around different natural disasters. So they actually showed one boss fight that was particularly created around fire and the threat that fire would serve. And, sometimes something wouldn't be on fire, but it could catch on fire, and then you can't be there anymore. So it sounds like they have the intention of doing boss fights that focus on different things. So I'm sure there'll probably be like earthquakes and floods and all sorts of various things with those also, which will be a wild thing. They also mentioned the score, and this is one thing that I had never previously thought of.
Love the music in the first one, man.
Yeah, the music was crazy, and they got the same guy, Woodkid. But this is something I'd never thought of. But this guy had apparently worked on a lot of games before. But he said that they give you, like, whenever they come to somebody and they say, "Hey, we want you to do the movie for a game," or "We want you to do the music for a game," they say you can have this many gigs. this many gigs of music is what you're allowed, because that's the amount of space we have left on the disk for you to work with, is this many
So they
gigs.
basically create partitions for different elements of the game, and that's what they give you for music.
Yeah. Yep. And he said,
Okay.
but Kojima did not do this. Kojima came to him first and said, just make music, and did not give him a limit. And which, this is a thing that we'll probably see more often now that we're all more and more going the way of digital as opposed to a physical disc. And even like we talked about so many times, the physical disc is really just a pass that lets you get, because all the patches, all that stuff, it's all downloaded anyway. So I think this will be a thing that we see more and more. But
Can I just say that, like, every time in the first one that a new song hit, and it would do that blow away where you're like just looking at everything,
that
but you could
cinematic
still
camera.
yeah, you could still control bridges, but it would do that blow away, view kind of thing. One thing I never figured out, and I don't know if it was available, is being able to play a song whenever I wanted to.
They do. That is a thing in the game. Yes.
Okay, I never could figure it out, I guess, or
I
just
can't remember where it is, but it is in the menu that you can play it.
because there were a lot of songs I was like, man, I'd like to hear that one song again.
The soundtrack will also be available on Spotify, and Elle Fanning
With
and
the art book.
Elle Fanning turns out has an incredible singing voice. And to
Yeah.
what degree Hideo Kojima is on this, I don't know, but the composer did tease that Hideo Kojima features in one track. What he's doing, I don't know, but he is in there. And so, speaking of this, a couple of things. One, you're talking about like the thing where there's always like this really, this big emotional sort of release, and this music that's really great for the moment as the camera pans back. They showed one of those moments on this stuff as the camera pans back, and I don't know if this was a thing that was in the first one or not, but they highlighted it on this, where Kojima was like, "Oh yeah, if you want to exit this view, there was a thing in the corner to exit that view to go back to the normal perspective." I'm like, why would you want to?
Why would you want to? Dude, I know this is going to sound cheesy and tacky and super stupid.
Oh man, I love those moments.
Some of that music was soul touching in the first one.
Oh, dude.
And it was because of either what you had just gone through, or what you knew you were heading towards, or just the way they, like I said, that blowout. Sometimes I would get the chills when they would do that, and that music would hit. Man, it was soul touching music.
It really was. I know we have talked about this ad nauseum across so many segments and episodes, but you truly do not understand the emotional attachment that you form to the characters, the packages, the landscape in this game until you play it.
Again, I know this wild. I know this is going to sound stupid, but like, even when I would see a package that somebody else had dropped, I would literally linger for a minute and go, wonder what caused them to drop it. Wonder what happened that caused it. Or did they just drop it because they're like, dude, I cannot make it there with this many packages.
And then you think, well, I got a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be me. Maybe I'll pick it up and I'll take it the rest of the way.
I'll carry it the rest of the way. It's like the old the God and the Footprints poem, dude. You carried it this far, I'll take it the rest of the way.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
Again, that's the power of Kojima, man. I remember whenever I first started playing the game, and I'd heard all this sort of really mixed, largely negative impressions from it. I didn't know what I was going to feel, but I fell in love with that game, and this feeling. It is crazy how, like you said, once you've gone through something, there's one scene in particular, and I remember I tried to replay this particular aspect so many different ways. There's this part where you have to go, like you have to climb this mountain, and you have to go through this gulch, basically, and get to the other side. And I tried so many ways to get through this thing and not get detected. And there is simply not a way to do it. You will come to there. It is going to happen. There will come a time you will get detected. You will have these encounters, whatever. But then once you get, you've just had this horrifically crazy. Not only is the terrain rough, which means it's hard to navigate, and it also limits the ability of like where you can move. but it's also raining, which is timefall, which
Right.
means that your packages are degrading. So you're trying to go through this thing as quickly as possible
you're
because you
trying
don't
to-
want to lose, huh?
You're trying to whisper and stay
Yeah.
low and move slow.
And yeah, you're trying to move slow, but you're trying to move fast. Like you
Yeah.
don't want to move so fast that you make noise, but you want to move fast enough that you don't lose your packages because they're degrading. Like you can see the chiral stuff coming off of them as the rain's hitting them, and you're
you got the
watching.
spray out. You're like,
Yeah,
trying to
you're
spray.
watching the packages wither away, and you go through all this, and then there's one moment after this whole thing. There's just this gentle green slope on the
Yeah.
other side of this mountain. Just gentle green slope,
And the
like
music hits.
that funnels right into this center that you're going towards, this building. And yeah, this music hits, the camera pans back.
Yeah.
You no longer have to worry about having your hands on your backpack
The
to
death
try to
grip.
balance everything, and you can just do this after everything that you just did. The rain is gone, the sun is out, the path is smooth, and all you got to do from this point forward is just walk to the building. After everything that you just did, you made it. You
And the
made
sense
it.
of relief you get from, because you have your controller here and you got your death grip, and now you've released your death grip, and your controller's just on your lap, and you're just pressing the left stick forward to get to the base you're talking. You're just like, oh my God, man.
Yeah, and it's unreal.
That was an endurance trial right there.
Yeah, and there are so many of those moments.
Yeah.
Across the game, it really is crazy. I know we sound. No matter how much we say it, you truly can't understand unless you play the game. It's really wild how they do it. But yeah, it's great.
It's quite literally an if you know situation.
Yes.
So I just hate all the people that failed to play it because they heard one time it was a walking simulator.
Well, or more likely, they heard a lot of times it was a walking simulator.
And it's anything but. Yeah, but then again, there's the crowd calling it a walking simulator that also did not play it.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is the lion's share of that group.
That is something also, speaking of
Which
crowd.
drives me crazy with any game, by the way.
Yeah, but you mentioning the crowd. So they did show a little bit of the very first moments that you take control of Sam in the game. So he starts off in Mexico, as we talked about before. The vast majority of this game will take place in Australia, but he starts off in Mexico, and he's in this like desert area, which of course these are not actual representations of the land masses as they are now. I mean, we saw the United States and its representation there. So it's whatever's going on. So it's a desert area right now, and where he's at in Mexico, but it's the tutorial segment. And they cut off the vast majority of all the intro there. So you don't see any of the cut scenes or cinematic stuff that led to that. But they wanted to show the landscape as the camera was panning across as it came to Sam. And while they were doing that, it showed different celebrities. And of course, this was in front of a crowd. It was in the Orpheum Theater. Yeah. So different names would pop up. And it would say George Miller, and people, oh yeah, George Miller, because George Miller is going to be in it. And then they started showing familiar names from the previous game that shouldn't be in this game, like Linda Wagner, and is that her name? The old one of my Linda Wagner and all
Lindsay
that.
Wagner.
Lindsay Wagner, thank you, Lindsay Wagner. And crowd's like, oh, cheering. And then Jeff Keighley brought that up after they're finished. He's like, hey, we saw some names from the previous game that we wouldn't have expected to see in the sequel
for various reasons.
And Kojima was like, oh yeah, well, some of the game we have to tell through flashbacks, and everybody played the first game, so there are various flashbacks in the game, so we have them in the credits for that reason. And Keighley, it was perfect. Keighley was just like, sure. Where it's like, classic. That's the only reason they're there. Yeah. Like, come on, classic Kojima.
Keighley.
Yeah, acting like we've never played a Kojima game. Like, we know there's more to it than that. So we'll see what he does. But it looks wild. I am very curious about some of it too. They again, the gameplay trailer, they did mention void outs, which for those unfamiliar, void outs are whenever somebody dies. If somebody dies in Death Stranding, you have to take that body and bring it to an incinerator at a very specific point of the map. You can't just burn the body. You have to take it to a special incinerator in the world map to get rid of the body in a safe way. Otherwise, it will create a void out, which is essentially the base, because there's these two worlds: there's the world of the living, the world of the dead. And if you kill somebody, the void out is essentially think of it in science like you've always heard about antimatter, when antimatter meets
Right.
matter,
One
and it just
annihilates
creates
the other.
this insane explosion. That's what happens. So if you kill someone in the game and you don't incinerate the body, it ends the game. It's essentially an atomic bomb that goes off. And for that reason, I never killed anyone in the game unless it was a requirement. So, very few times did I go to the incinerator. And it's still the same in this game because they mentioned void outs and all that stuff. But then on the gameplay, it was showing like how you could go around and you could do stuff quietly, you do stuff loud. I would swear that there was a moment where he went behind this dude with a garrote wire, and then I'm pretty sure he snapped this guy's neck. So I do wonder like how that's going to work with, especially with they've mentioned this new focus on combat. We'll see. We'll see what happens whenever it comes to killing humans. There's other entities that can be dealt with where you don't have to worry about the same repercussions. But when it comes to people, like just other humans, that's been a thing. So I don't know. We'll see. But it looks wild. I believe it's the 26th of this month. It's coming up soon. So we are very close to the launch of the game. So get ready to hear more about another game that seems to be not a big interest to the YouTube audience at large, but Jay and I love it. You're going to be getting a lot of 007. You're going to be getting a lot of Death Stranding.
I've got another one that could potentially fall in the exact same category. So I'm a huge fan of pretty much every form of media, including books. And I've read all 9 main books of this series. I also watched the Amazon Sci-Fi and Amazon Prime series.
I was actually going to say that I think it's going to be the other way. I think this is a game that I would think would fall under this sort of thing, but I think it's going to be the other way. I think it seems like it would be that, but I've already seen more interest than I would have thought. I think it's going to be the sleeper. I think we're going to have people that we would not have expected to be into this.
I hope you're right, but the series we're talking about in particular, it started with books. It actually started with the idea about a tabletop game, turned into books, turned into a show that got canceled, turned into a show that Jeff Bezos loved and bought it and brought it to Amazon. And
one of the best sci-fi shows ever, by the way.
Ever. And we got a Telltale game from it that just did not do it justice, although I love the character because Kamina Drummer is one of my favorite characters. But of course, we are talking about The Expanse, Osiris Reborn. They released a trailer.
Which showcase was this? Was it the Xbox showcase?
This was the Summer Game Fest one.
Oh, was it the Summer Games Fest one?
Yeah,
okay.
Summer Games Fest. Just looking at the screenshot here, much like you reacted when I showed the Alpha Protocol one, this already interests me right off the bat. This is taking place apparently within the confines of the show we saw on TV. According to the developers, Owlcat Games, the Eros incident is going to be a big time involvement in this.
As you can see in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah. Also, obviously, you see the proto-molecule at work just in this picture. We got a 3-minute trailer, which we didn't deserve a 3-minute trailer, but we got one anyway. And it was fantastic. And I told Mason, of course, that I liked the trailer. I did. I felt like it showed a lot of cinematic up front, and I was really happy that they showed a few segments of gameplay towards the end so we could see that it did indeed look wonderful. At least on par with, I felt like on par with not only the game I just played, the demo for Jump Ship, but on par with Star Citizen and those games of recent mention, Starfield, whatnot. But I love the idea that you can create at the very beginning, you can create your character as either a Earther or an Inulota, if you've watched the show, a Beltalota, or a Martian or Mickey, if you're referring to Amos because he calls them Mickeys. But so you can be a Martian, a Belter, or an Earther, and then you're going to recruit crew. So they didn't really get crazy into that. They did say you're going to have a very diverse crew, but I'm wondering if there's people you can turn down and people you can bring in because they didn't really talk about that per se. And I did get to watch Owlcat Games play some of this, so that was cool too. But they really didn't get into your crew makeup. But I always tell people all the time, if you love the Expanse and you haven't played Mass Effect 2, that's about the closest you're going to get to the Expanse is playing Mass Effect 2.
Well, and that was
Now we're
whenever
actually
this
going to
trailer
get,
started,
yeah.
heavy Mass Effect vibes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now we're finally going to get an actual Expanse game where you get to be the captain of your own ship and you get to recruit your crew. I don't know how much the choice you decide on what you are, Martian, Earther, or Belter, is going to affect the main story. I'm assuming a lot. There's probably going to be places that you'll be able to get into easy as one classification versus the other. Like they've talked about the fact you're going to be able to go to Tycho and you're going to be able to go to Ceres and you're going to be able to go to Eros and all the places we saw in the books and the show. Those places you're going to be. Then they literally at the very end, and they did, and there's that nice little, and you might run into some people you know and love, which I'd almost bet you money Amos is going to be in it because he is involved in pretty much anything the Expanse does now. So I'm hoping Fred Johnson's in it, and I'm hoping Kamina Drummer and all those people are in it. But so it's going to take place within the confines of the show, so that's cool too. I don't know what in game looks like. Nobody does. We don't know how much replayability it's got. My expectations for this are ceiling level, but I'm still metering my personal. I'm trying to, I'm like, please God, be good. Please, we need this to be good.
Well, until the weekend, which this was its first announcement, I had no idea the existence of this game, and then this first trailer was one of the most impressive announced trailers I've seen in a long time. And I was on board right from the jump. I was like, okay, this looks amazing. Like, yeah, let's hope that this sticks to landing. Right now, there's no release date that I'm aware of. And Owlcat Games, I am not familiar with them. Like,
So
this is the first game
Owlcat
that I know
Games-
they've done a lot of like PC centric stuff. So I was going to ask you what else they've done.
So they did Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is a D&D turn-based clone. It was available on not only PC but Mac, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. Then they did the sequel, which was Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which is an excellent title, by the way. If you like turn-based and if you're a tabletopper, it is literally tabletop in game format. They did Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, which I told you about, which is basically Baldur's Gate in the Warhammer universe.
So
they did Warhammer. Well, they are doing Warhammer 40K Dark Heresy, which is a game that's not out yet, which I'm excited about. And then, of course, this Expanse game.
So do you expect this Expanse to be a turn-based RPG?
I don't. I think it's going to be. I mean, just watching the footage I've seen so far, both from the trailer,
It looked like Mass Effect 2 or something like that, kind of gameplay from that.
Yeah, that's what I think it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of create your own choices in your dialogue. I think the combat is going to be straight up action.
So that's intriguing for them to go the action RPG route whenever they have a legacy of turn-based. But we'll see. But I was so excited for this. And yeah, my brother texted me and like I was telling Jay before the show, like we're all nerds. We all love sci-fi. The Expanse is great, but it's not super common that he texts me with trailers and stuff. And so that was one where it's like, oh man, so this is getting around. Like people are, and then it became a huge deal I saw a lot of creators doing wrap-ups of the various showcases.
Yeah.
And this popped up as a highlight for a lot of creators. So this it's building a lot of hype just from this launch trailer. So,
and most people have Netflix, but not a lot of people have Amazon Prime. So I get people not seeing the show. I definitely get people not reading the books. People don't read books anymore. I mean, I feel like I'm like one of 12 people that do, but space games right now are huge. I mean, they're absolutely huge, especially on PC. But we've had quite a few on on PlayStation and consoles. But there's going to be the Mass Effect crowd that watched this trailer and they're like, "Holy shit, this is modern Mass Effect. This is what we deserve to get with Andromeda."
And especially now that BioWare seems to be a husk of what it used to be.
Pardon
Where
your
they're
pun.
no, yeah, pardon the pun. Any Mass Effect fans will get that. But they just don't seem. I no longer have the faith that BioWare has the ability to create something on par with their legacy any longer. I think the people that were capable of that are gone, and Andromeda was such a disappointment. Don't even get me started on Dragon Age. And Anthem, so many things. They have had 3 massive flops
Yeah.
in a row.
I mean, there's shit in the bed, and then there's what they did. And the funny thing is, there's no way James S.A. Corey, the 2 guys that write The Expanse, weren't inspired by Mass Effect. You said husk. What did those husks look like? They were
Yeah,
these
that upper
charred
right,
zombies
that
with this
zombie in the
blue,
upper right hand corner is what they looked like. Yeah,
with this blue, and then when what's his name, the main bad guy in the first game, once he started getting augmented, it looked like he was just infused with proto molecule. But brother, listen, and this is the one part I really wanted to share tonight because I didn't get it until tonight. But we're both huge Thomas Jane fans,
love
and
Tom Jane.
Detective Miller is without a doubt one of the most integral characters to this story. And if you pre-order the deluxe edition, or if you get the deluxe edition of the game, you get the Detective Miller suit complete with his funny hat, as Anderson Dawes would
Too
say.
bad you don't get his haircut to go along with it.
And technically, this wasn't Miller's pistol. He got this pistol at the Blue Falcon.
That's a Chiappa Rhino for anybody that might be wondering. That's the standard sci-fi futuristic looking gun, but it's a real gun.
It's very, very Blade Runner-esque with the Blade Runner pistol, although it's the Blade Runner one's shorter. But of course, we also get the digital art book and soundtrack and whatever the Hall of Fame is.
I'm not concerned about that one.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely want the Miller outfit because I think that'll be cool. So it makes me wonder too, are we going to have some straight up like investigation style missions, which would be great because Mass Effect 2 had those.
Well, I mean, you're talking about their history of tabletop like stuff,
Yeah.
and obviously, something like Baldur's Gate 3, that's a huge part of it. I've never played any of their other games, so I don't know. Do they have that same sort of level of side quests and that kind of stuff on those other games?
Theirs actually goes in more grisly detail than Baldur's. I mean, I'm telling you, it's easy to tell people that Baldur's Gate 3 is like playing Dungeons and Dragons in a video game, but Pathfinder is literally like playing it. I mean, you can see every aspect of your stat sheet and everything as you go into a combat round. So yeah, investigation was huge. But I'm hoping in an action RPG format that they still include that because that's a big part of what makes the Expanse great. I mean, you watch that show or read the books, and everywhere they go, there's almost always an investigation first.
Well, same like with Mass Effect, like that's the whole thing. Like Mass Effect, you go these different areas. So yeah, I want this to be good.
Don't
so
Bro.
bad.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm probably that's the thing I'm most out of everything this weekend. This is the one I'm most excited for is the Expanse, without a doubt.
Yeah. So to
and that's
go
crazy
back
because I love James Bond, but
Yeah, well, to go back to one of the things that I talked about earlier. So just imagine that you watched all that stuff in that trailer, and then whenever they did the title splash screen, it said Call of Duty Black Ops 7. That's what I felt whenever I watched that trailer, where I was like, oh, here we go. I'm in. What is it? What could it be? What are we going to do? And then it was like, that was a splash screen. I was like,
I didn't really feel your pain until you just now said that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would have been awful. I would have lost my mind.
That's what I felt whenever they did that. that feeling of something amazing being taken from you. That's what I felt during the end of the Xbox showcase.
That
So
is
I'm glad
crazy,
that one
man.
looks super positive. Like I said, I am so excited for that game, having not even known it existed just a matter of days ago, or not even known that it was being worked on.
Yeah.
And I'm so starved for something to fill that void that Mass Effect left. And I even told my brother, who had texted this to me, I'd already seen the trailer, but then he texted it to me. I'm like, I know, doesn't this look cool? And he's like, oh yeah. Well, he's like, they've done a lot of RPGs in the past, and I have no doubt that they can handle that aspect of the game, the story aspect of it. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm hoping, like, just from the trailer and the way that it looked, I'm hoping this can fill the void that I've had since I finished Mass Effect 3. And we'll see. I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I'm glad that they've got a legacy of good games, even though it's not in this particular genre. But we have seen companies go out on a limb with a genre that is outside of their typical format and do great. For example, one of the more recent versions was Respawn doing the Fallen Order, the Jedi Fallen Order games.
Yes.
Respawn was all about first person shooters. And so we heard, like, they're going to be doing a third person, like,
Lightsaber.
Uncharted / Soulsborne game for like, what? But it came out and they're great. Love them. Love those games. So we'll see what they do. I'm super excited. Again, I can't tell you how I'm trying to not get too excited. I don't want to be crushed, but
The crazy thing
so
is,
excited.
man, like, I can't wait to walk around Ceres and walk around Tycho Station and see.
I want it to feel like that first time you walked around the Citadel in Mass Effect.
Dude. Oh man, without a doubt, I wish I could have that feeling all over again. That was walking onto the Citadel in the first game. The first time, I was like, oh my god.
Where you're like, wait, I get to go, like, this thing that we just saw this whole cutscene about. I get to just walk around in it now.
Yeah.
And going back and playing the Mass Effect games, it's kind of funny how little of the Citadel you actually have access to in that first game.
Absolutely.
Like, it
still felt big, but
yeah, I remember getting lost in the Citadel in the first game, and then going back and playing, I'm like, how did I get lost? There's
because we're used to these huge, gigantic places. So yeah,
but it felt that way in the first game. Whenever you first got that, it felt gigantic. And now, like, we have more and more games where we actually do get to play around in these gigantic areas. So I really hope that we get that feeling again, where it's like all the things that what can I run into? There's so many doors. What lies behind each one of these doors?
It makes me, it makes me feel sorry for you too, because you haven't got to play Odyssey on Elite Dangerous, because there's some places you go to there that are just and Star Citizen, of course, you go there and you're just like, wait, what? Where do I go? What am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. There's no quest markers, so you're like, oh my god, what am I doing?
Yeah, so, it's crazy to be this excited over a game that's, who knows, we don't even know how far off this game is.
No, we
from
don't.
Release.
I'm hoping it's close.
But the Mass Effect vibes, like, it just touched something in me in that trailer, that all the hopes and dreams that I had for Andromeda and Dragon Age and Anthem and all that stuff, they just got like, they've been buried and murdered and beaten, and with all the failed releases that BioWare has done, and they were, like, resurrected and attached onto this game. It's not this game's fault. It's not this game's fault that I'm, like, resting all these expectations on it.
It's totally this. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not Osiris's fault that I'm resting these games on it. It's BioWare's fault. But it's like, I'm putting all these expectations on them, and they've just shown us, like, hey guys, we're doing a thing. But man, I because of my experience with BioWare's last 3 games, I just want this so bad.
Yeah, me too, man.
And I hope it lives up to it.
Well, listen, man, I know we got to finish, but because we're already hitting the 2-hour mark, but I'm going to do a truncated version of my install journey. We talked about it last week. So Starfield, there's a guy that released a total conversion mod for Starfield that turns it into a Star Wars game. And Mason and I talked about it, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do it yet.
Actually looked better as a Star Wars game than it did as the Starfield.
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I read what I needed to read. There was an absolute litany of stuff I had to do to even get my system ready for it. So I had to delete Starfield. I had to go in and search for folders that had anything to do with Starfield, delete all of those. Then I had to create 3 folders. Then I had to download a mod tool called Wabajack. Then I had to download the mod list for Star Wars Genesis off of Nexus. Then I had to add that to Wabajack. Then I had to start the install process. This took 4 hours. There are 324 mods in this mod list, ranging from 3 kilobytes to 1.7 gigabytes. And it does download a bunch of them. Once you click on one and it gives you the option to click on the next one, it's still probably downloading the previous 2 or 3 you've done. But 324 of them. And then when it gets done, you're like, okay, it's done. I can play now. No, absolutely cannot play now. I'm old school, so I do things differently. But this is my note pages of notes of things I had to do before I got started. I have pictures of this, by the way. I'll send it to you. But I had to go to a folder and run a bat file. Then I had to locate another folder and click on properties and disable full screen optimization. Then I had to load the game. I don't get to launch the game from the Starfield icon. I have to launch the game from modorganizer.exe. Then there's a whole list of things I'm supposed to do if I get any pop-ups. And then I have to restart the game after I reach the main menu to load the mod. So then I restart the game after that. And then I start a new game. Then there's another set of lists if I get any pop-ups. And then finally you spawn in Coruscant. And you're like, sweet, I'm in Coruscant. Do I get to play? Oh, hell no. After you create your character, you have to open your inventory once, save your game, and then reboot it. Reboot the whole game again. And then you load back into your game. You're like, sweet, I can play that. No, now that's when you can actually adjust your graphics and settings. Then you have to save the game again and then reboot.
Oh my God.
And now I'm free to play.
So start to finish, from you being like, okay, let's do this, to you actually being able to start the game in earnest. What time frame are we talking here?
We're talking 4 hours and probably 30 more minutes. So 4.5 hours. So then I get into the game and it runs like a dream. I got a pretty decent system. So it runs like a dream. It looks gorgeous. I do want to say, when you went through the character creation thing, they literally have every race of everybody that was ever invented for Star Wars. I mean, if you want to be whatever race Figrin Dan was, the band leader from Episode 4's Cantina, you can be Figrin Dan. If you want to be the classes of character, you can be from a soldier to a bounty hunter to a monk, like Chirrut Imwe was in Rogue One. All that is available. Then there's 7 or 8 different starting points that you can choose from. Then you can pick traits, and they're all Star Wars related. None of this is Starfield. And then you can go to the lodge like you normally go to in Starfield, and you'll meet your crew leader, and you'll start the Yuzon Vong main story. I sent you a link on the lore for this game, and you should read it because it's phenomenal what this guy's come up with. But long story short, because I know we need to get off here, but it was worth it. I mean, it was worth it. It's everything sounds right. The blasters sound right. I haven't got a lightsaber yet. I'm trying to go lightsaber bounty hunter. I'm trying to go Jedi bound, like a rogue Jedi, like a gray Jedi, where I'm not either way, and so I can do the lightsaber thing. But haven't done that yet. So I've just done like blaster, jetpack. I'm still trying to secure my first ship because everything's expensive, and the game is way harder combat wise than Starfield. And
Yeah,
He actually
Starfield's
has a whole
combat was pretty
disclaimer section.
simplistic.
Yeah. So he has a whole section. Hey, if you think this game's hard, I'm sorry. It is. Don't be stupid. You know, be tactical the way you attack things. So it's excellent. I don't know what to tell you. It's excellent. Probably about the time I get used to it, there'll be a big update to it, and then I'll have to go through all this crap again. But it's worth it. So love it.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of it as we play through it and getting some more reports back on it. That does remind me. You mentioning the hell that you had to go through to get it started.
Yeah.
Reminds me very much of my beginning experience with not PlayStation, the Switch 2, but I'll save that for next week and talk to you about the hellscape that was trying to actually use the Switch 2 after, actually receiving it. It was the most Nintendo thing ever.
Hey, at least your receipt wasn't stapled to your screen.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, GameStop, for a lot of those things. Yeah, thankfully I ordered mine from Best Buy and it got delivered to my door. So yeah, I didn't get the crucifixion treatment that GameStop gave their customers.
So next week we'll start with to switch to or not to switch to. And just leave it at that, because that'll be interesting conversation, because I'm not the biggest I'm not the biggest handheld fan. That's what it really is.
Not the biggest Nintendo fan in general.
Yeah, true. So anyway.
But all right, guys. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize
thank you for
my
being
illness.
here, even though you're sick, dude. That's awesome.
Always happy to be here, and we will see you guys next week. Give us a like, a subscribe, and be sure to turn on the notifications so that you get notified anytime that we update any of these things. So yeah, we will talk to you next time.
Later, fellas and ladies and whoever.